Most of us are waiting for clarity to arrive when things calm down, when projects are done, maybe when kids get older, or when we have more time, when the conditions are finally right. But my guest for today did not get that option. He was a bachelor living in Los Angeles, doing his acting stuff, doing design, filmmaking. A man that describes himself with doing my own work with a few responsibilities outside of work. Then he got a call that his 89-year-old mother was placed on her deathbed, 3,000 miles away from LA, up there in New Jersey. And he had to rush back. He had to show up for his mother, and the mother woke up. And then he had to move back to his childhood home to take care of her. What he did experience is the reason we are here. He wrote a book that has now won up to 17 major literary awards in just 2 years. And this is actually including a 2025 Global Book Award gold medal. And has been compared to top books and a book that is called A Cup of Tea on the Commode. Porro, author, caregiver, designer, actor, and a man who now lives in the south of France. Welcome to the Clarity Mandate podcast.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to really have you. And I want to start this conversation back in LA. I want us to go back to Los Angeles before that call came, talking about your mom. You described your life then as carefree, no steady girlfriend, no children, few responsibilities outside of work. You were acting, you were designing, you were making films, you were starting companies, and some accidentally, like you say. So I'd like you to paint to me and to our listeners a picture of the life that you were living. What was the shape of your days just before you got that phone call?
My main focus at that time, I was in my mid 50s, so my acting career was on the wane. I had a pretty good career, but unless you're a star, you have a major representation, things slow up. So I had to accept that. But my focus was on a snack company that my brother and I started to honor my father. He invented a half pop popcorn snack back in 1963. And we kept it, or he kept it, as a family secret. And I thought the product was great. And eventually, my father stopped making it altogether in the 80s. And as we started having nieces and nephews join the family, I thought it was a shame that they didn't get to try their grandfather's snack that we love so much. So I asked my father for the recipe and I revived it. And so the plans were to take it to market, but unfortunately, my dad passed before we did that. And a year after he passed, though, because of the plans my brother pitched in, we were in stores in 1998, a year after he passed. And we built it into a national brand. And so that was almost a 24/7 job for me at that point. But what that gave me is my multitasking skills, because I ended up doing not only all the selling and marketing and the website and all the design, and I actually designed the equipment and built the factory, but I was cooking every little golden nugget. Not really by choice, it was because I could be a stickler, and we had trouble maintaining quality. And the best thing for me to do was design a factory where I could run it as a one-man show. And so that was all time consuming.
I want us to still go back to your stay in California before you finally moved. And you mentioned starting five nonprofit companies and immediately clarify that none of them were intended to be nonprofit. So I need to understand that sentence before we go further into the details of the stories, the details of your mom's
Right.
health. Let's
Yeah.
clear that out.
In LA at that time, that was in the mid 80s. And if you had any ambition, it was a great place because if you worked hard, you could really do some fun stuff. I went there with, I had a design degree from the Ohio State University. So I had a good design job actually waiting for me in LA. But I wanted to pursue acting. So that was my main goal after acting. I started studying acting during the daytime design. But then I started a greeting card company because I had these ambitions and I always had this cartoon character that I drew as a kid. I started a greeting card company that ended up being a nonprofit. But for a while there, it was successful. But I have to say, overall, we stopped that. But I took what I learned. It was a great line from Nelson Mandela. He says, I don't lose, I learn. So I took what I learned from that experience and took it to the next one. So another one was art brokerage. I discovered this one artist and I thought he was very interesting and I liked his artwork. So I had actually a partner with this one, and we bought some of his work and then tried to resell it for a profit. And that ended up not working out. I still have a bunch of his work. Luckily, I like his work, but so that was not a great project. And I'd have to say my acting for quite a bit overall was probably a nonprofit as well. And then I also dabbled in stand-up comedy, nonprofit. And now I'm going to get very depressed with all these nonprofits. So the only thing that I did that was profitable was the snack food company that we created for my dad. But still, overall, that probably was not because it was still relatively new. And when you start becoming successful and the big companies come after you, and when they can't buy you, we had no interest in selling at that point, they can make some trouble for you. So buying up supplies and things like that. So that ended up probably also being a nonprofit.
That's interesting. The guy who does design, acting, and greeting cards and everything else, and plus the snacks company. And here he is transitioning to become a caregiver and then moving on to another part of his career. So I want you to tell us more detailedly about the call, not the medical fact, the internal experience that you had, and taking that phone call. What happened inside of you that caused you to make that decision that you are going to move back home and do this full time? Because that was a real transition from
Right,
living in LA to going thousands of miles back to New Jersey for this commitment,
right.
love, call it love business, to your
Hmm.
mother. What was going on inside?
Well, 14 years earlier, my father passed, and I only had 8 days with him. We were caring for, he was very far along with heart disease, so we knew his end was near, and we only called hospice near the very end. We called them, and 2 days later, he died. So when I hear hospice, your heart stops almost. So my brother called and said, Mom is shut down. Hospice has been called. Then right away you think, oh my gosh, 2 days, that's it. So you fly home right away. And when I saw my mother in bed, pretty much non responsive, we had all the six kids prepared to say goodbye. And we had a priest come in and deliver the last rites. We picked out a eco-friendly casket for my mom and all those things that you have to take
Hmm.
care of, the business as opposed, and not just the emotional of saying goodbye,
Yep.
all the practical things too.
Yep.
So that we kind of faced that. And so that was not easy. But again, it's mom's 89, so it's not that surprising. It's going to happen. You certainly want your parents to be around as long as possible, but you don't want them to suffer. And if she was depressed and wanted to go, we wish her well. But it would have been a very different story if she did pass at that time, because I don't think I would be uh, as in good spirits as I am now, because she lived another 3.5 years. And I think a lot of that had to do with the love of her family wanting her to stick around. And when she did finally pass, it was beautiful because she died in her bed, surrounded by love in the house that she raised us all in. And my dad, the same thing, 14 years earlier, he died in his bed at home with us taking care of him. And they both left this earth in a way I think most people would envy. And that certainly helped me, and I think my siblings too, with the grieving process, because it was a beautiful way to go.
That's powerful. And making that decision, and you said the trigger word was hospice, and that caused you to move back home. And in your mind, this is going to be saying goodbye
Yeah,
because it was like 2 days after, but you ended up establishing yourself as the caregiver in charge of your mom. And by your own account, you had to help her. And you said your response was to help her with things like now you are the leader at the moment, leading your mom, who used to be the leader. And tell me about what did it for you to take that role, the authority to run the household of a woman who has been in charge of her
yeah,
own household and of all of you for 89 years. And now you have to come and be her new boss.
yeah. I don't know if it was much of a surprise for my mom or my dad, because they both worked full time. They both had their own careers, and they raised six very independent children. And I joke in the book, if you put two of us in the same room to solve a problem, there's going to be friction because each of us knows the better way to do it. And so to take charge was not hard for me to do. My mother trusted me, and I was very fortunate because my siblings also trusted me. I think I proved myself over the years that once I committed to something, give it 100%. And even though I had no children and never married, I did have some commitment issues with love, I guess. But in this particular case, there was going to be no commitment issue. And they were great. They actually yielded to me. And, they would even ask, some of them would ask, can I come over today? And I said, of course, it's your house. You have keys, come whenever you want. But I think they saw how happy my mom was. I think I took a more romantic approach than even my sisters did. I grew up with three sisters, and I learned how to take care of and how to respect women, and to do more than just put the toilet seat down. And they all had long hair, and I knew how to brush hair and put it in a ponytail or to braid it. And I know my mother loved pampering, even though she didn't do much of it in her life because she worked full time and then had six kids. But she did like to go to the beauty parlor once a week for a shampoo and to get her nails done. Her nails were like the crown jewels. And so one of the first things I wanted to do is I felt her dignity was kind of whittled away. And I think that happens as we get older, we take things for granted, or at least the young people take things for granted of what the old people may like. And I realized my mother, I didn't think she was, the clothes weren't that great that she was wearing. They were tattered and kind of dull day dresses or night dresses. She wore no lipstick. Her hair wasn't well kept. And I don't even know why my sisters didn't pick up on this. So maybe it took a man to say, hey, you're a pretty lady, and right now you don't look great. So you want to cheer somebody up, a new wardrobe's going to do it. So I did the new wardrobe. And then I created a thing called Day of Beauty. And I didn't think that much of it, but I knew my mom liked the beauty parlor. And when she came to visit me in LA, I took her to my friend's beauty salon in Beverly
Mm.
Hills. And she got the movie star treatment. And I know she really enjoyed that. So I don't know when the last time she went to a beauty parlor. So I tried to recreate that at home. And so I called it Day of Beauty. And normally I gave her two sponge baths, one in the morning and one in the evening. But Day of the Beauty, while she sat on the commode, I would soak her feet in Epsom salts and I would wash her hair and then get her to the bed and take care of any medical issues if there were. Gave her a full body massage and she got a fresh diaper. And then she picked out her new wardrobe. And then I stood her up, and she had pretty strong legs, but she could no longer
Wow.
walk at this point. But when I stood her up, there's another thing we take for granted, these little things. A hug is so important. And sometimes as they get older, the hug can be painful because they're a little more fragile.
Mm.
And if they're laying in bed, very difficult. She was able to stand up and we gave each other a
Wow.
hug, and neither one wanted to let go because it was just a lovely moment. And
Wow.
and then I got her in the wheelchair, and then I blow dried her hair and put it in a ponytail or sometimes braid. And then I did her nails, and then I gave her a little red lipstick to match her bright red nails. And I thought she looked great, but no big deal, just a nice little thing for a son to do. And as I'm wheeling her into the kitchen for breakfast, we pass a big mirror in the dining room. And I parked her in front of that mirror. Now, I don't know the last time she looked in the mirror, and I don't know the last time she looked in the mirror and liked what she saw, but what she saw that day was beautiful. And
Wow.
I saw her just smiling from ear to ear, and I leaned in and I said, "Who is that pretty girl?" And it was lovely. And again, that I thought it was a nice gesture, but that was profound, the power of that little thing. And it made me
Wow.
realize that wanting to feel pretty does not fade with age. And those things that we take for granted, we shouldn't. And that moment made very clear that I didn't take anything for granted anymore. Some of our
Wow.
most favorite moments was just sitting at the kitchen table and holding hands. No words needed to be spoken. There was so much love in going through our hands, and those things are just beautiful. And so I
Wow.
started recording all these things because I thought my siblings were going to miss out because I was privy to all these lovely moments, some very interesting conversations because she
Yeah.
did suffer.
Hold the thoughts. We're going to get
Okay,
into the
sorry.
details of that. But let's go to one of the concepts that you put out in the book. And that is, I'll call it the concept at the center of the book, which I want to name directly the parent child role reversal. And you became, in effect, the parent. She became, in some way, the child. And how did you, I know you've actually explained how you made her feel really good, but psychologically, how did you navigate that without losing your original relationship that is really underneath of you being the son and ma and getting you pampering her and maybe in some way pampering yourself instead of her pampering you like the boy that she raised.
Yeah.
How psychologically, how did that really work out for you?
Well, I have to admit, I didn't think of it psychologically. I just thought of these are things I need to do. Her life is now in my hands. I'm responsible for her. So there's not too much thought in the head other than I need to get her up. I need to give her a sponge bath. I need to feed her. I need to, if I can, make her laugh once a day and all that stuff. I think But again, she's still my mom and I'm still her son. So I did ask for permission
That's
most
right.
of the time. I wanted her to know that I still respected that relationship. One of the things I did also while she was sleeping, because she was like a baby, she slept many hours, I renovated her house. I wanted to bring dignity back to her environment. And so I kept her included in all the decisions for that. And there were some
Wow.
funny moments that came out of that, but she helped me pick paint colors and when I finished the first floor I finished was the basement. I would carry her down there for her approval and she loved it. But before we finished that, the last step in the basement was the carpet, choosing the carpet. And so on her breakfast tray, I got two 3 by 3 inch carpet samples to make the final choice. And I left them on her breakfast tray and then went in to refill her sippy cup with juice. And when I came back, she had one of the carpet samples in her mouth and a scowl on her face. And I said, "What is going on?" She says, "This is not a cookie." And I said, "No." So her eyesight wasn't all that great.
Mhm.
I said, "No, Mom, it's a carpet sample. Which one tastes better?" And she chose well. So there were some light moments like that, or,
Wow. Wow.
uh, but most of them were good. And then there was another moment when I finished the upstairs bathroom. I put a very large bathtub up there. And I asked her if she wanted to christen it with a bubble bath. And she said, sure. And so at this point, I think she's 91. And so I carry her upstairs and I prepare a nice bubble bath and I put her in the tub and arrange the bubbles so nothing is too revealing. And I shoot a picture. And again, she's grinning from ear to ear. She's having the best time. And then she passes out. And I'm like, oh no, I want to do something nice. And now I kill my mother. So I thought, because she had a wicked sense of humor, I thought maybe she's joking. So I'm tapping her and she fainted completely. So I pull her out of the tub and I dry her off. And I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to explain this to my siblings? I killed your mother with a bubble bath, but at least she smelled good. So I dried her off and carried her downstairs, put her back to bed. And then I called a nurse. And the nurse said that she fainted because I left her in the hot water too long. So her blood pressure dropped and she fainted. So I stayed with her and she woke up about 30 minutes later. She didn't remember fainting, but she did remember the new bathroom, which she loved. That was a
Wow.
awkward moment
No,
with
that
me being a first time parent.
and there is a specific scene in the book that you talk about your mother's relentless search for discarded cheese labels at a family reunion, and you and your brother looking at that point with some kind of accusing fingers. That scene, it's really hilarious. And my question to you is, it happened in real time, and what was it for you to put these kind and many of this kind of scenes, real things that happen, and how she responded in the book, and you didn't feel like, no, this thing is too kind of awkward, let me keep it out, it looks absurd or something like that, but you really brought in the real side of the story behind how your mom interacted with you all. That was interesting.
Well, she was a shopaholic. That was her only addiction. And she had this obsession with the UPC labels because you could, if you collected enough of them, you could send away and get a collectible. She loved collectibles. Any company that came out with a collectible, she would cut out. She would buy all the unnecessary packages to just to get the UPC labels to get to a useless collectible. And so we were at this point we knew her and she occasionally did go a little crazy with this. So this particular incident, we were really trying to protect our nephew, who never saw his grandmother in that state before, but she was obsessed with this cheese labels. And so we just wanted to have fun to protect him, but also let our mother know, listen, this is you're going a little too extreme on this one. And she certainly forgave us shortly after that. But I don't, again, I think in the book I said, I don't know who started it, but we all had the same sense of humor. So all of us started picking up. As soon as she looked at one of us, we dropped like she shot us. And it was very funny. And I think she would have to laugh about it afterwards. Certainly not in the moment because she wanted those cheese labels. But yeah, I think those things are good because they show more of my certainly my mom's character and certainly her children's how we dealt with it and stuff like that. And so those
Wow.
are fun moments. I have many more that we cut out many in the book because our my publisher and stuff would say these aren't necessary, but other ones, so that you're getting like the gems, the
Wow.
ones that stayed in the book.
That's powerful. And you titled the book A Cup of Tea on the Commode. And it came from a specific decision that you made to make a practical, delightful moment for your mother to make it more human, more pleasant. And for me, that was not just caregiving. That it's maybe from your background design principles, background of design, and how much did you approach caregiving um, with your design thinking and solving the problems within the caregiving environment. And now, in this case, where the person of concern, it's your mom, and you looked at it not just from a function point of view, but bringing yourself in as a son, bringing in your design background. How much of all that really helped you serve your mom the way you did?
Well, I think not only the design, but the acting as well. When this whole thing first started, seeing my mother naked for the first time at 89 years old, and that's awkward, certainly for a son. You see what the years have done to her. But I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable with me taking this on. So that's when my acting kicked in. I said, I am now playing the role of caregiver. So I will be a joyful caregiver. I didn't want my mother to feel like she was a burden. I did this because I loved her and I wanted to make her last years as pleasant as possible. So the acting certainly came in, the design came in as well, because when you're designing, you have to take into consideration the end user of your product, whether it's a teacup or a toaster or even a brochure or a logo. So you have to have empathy. So empathy played a major role in this. She's still your mother, but she is a little more fragile. She may be a little slower. She may suffer from dementia. You can't take any of that personally. You have to just put yourself in their shoes and go at their pace. And so empathy is a big component of design, but also in acting as well. So all those things all came together. And maybe that's what made this approach, at least in this instance, successful because
Wow.
all my experiences came in. And certainly the multitasking, which is what I certainly did in my factory, came into play because I was able to do a lot of stuff at the same time and not get overwhelmed by it.
Wow. That's powerful. And Mark, you originally planned to write this, document everything that was going on for your siblings who could not all be with you at the same time. You didn't want them to miss the moments that you were witnessing with your mother. Then a friend came to you and talked about their own caregiving journey, and you shared some tips that helped her and that changed everything for her. So, walk me through the decision to take something as private as putting together memories that you wanted to keep for the rest of the family, your siblings who could not be there, and to the world now, because we are reading it and we are learning from it. What did that cost you? And what did it open for you?
Well, if I come upon I think a good story, my instinct from Hollywood is to make it a movie, write a screenplay, and so that would be the first thing. And I thought because of our relationship with the humor, and from a son's point of view, this would be an interesting story. So not only did I take notes for my siblings because I didn't want them to miss on these things, but I thought maybe this could be an interesting story. But when my friend called and got some benefit from what I shared with her, I thought the best way to get this out and to share it with others and maybe hopefully help or inspire others would be a book because that process is a lot faster. Hollywood takes many, many years.
Mm.
And so that's when I decided to put it in a book form. But I couldn't write it right away because, again, I get very emotional when it comes to family. So I kept taking notes. And then when I would come up with things that I thought were interesting, I would just keep jotting notes down. But it wasn't until a couple years after my mom passed, and when I actually lived here in this room, is where I wrote the book, that I was able to sit down and really start to write it as a book. And I knew it was going to be memoir, and I'd never written a book before, so I had to study that genre. So I took classes online to study memoir, and I wanted to be a published author. So I wanted the book to be as good as possible. So I got it into what I thought was pretty good shape. And I actually had two publishers interested. And I went with the one that was more interested in quality as opposed to getting it out to the market. And we took another, I think, a year and a half refining it. And yeah, and it was great. So I'm very happy with the end results. And I think the publisher certainly is. And it's been resonating with people around the world. And that's been lovely.
That is really, really lovely. 17 awards in 2 years, including a Global Book Award gold medal. You are an award-winning designer, a filmmaker. So this is not your first encounter with recognition, but a debut memoir winning at this level, to me, it's truly remarkable. And has there been any surprises? What has surprised you about the response to this book? Not the awards, but the personal note from readers who connected with the stories, like the feedback. Have you had lots of feedback?
Yeah.
Um,
In fact, that's been I think the most rewarding part of this whole process is you put your heart or soul into something and you hope it's going to resonate with an audience. And when you start, the awards are nice. That at least says you're a good writer and you tell a good story. But when those stories connect with the readers, and the personal notes I've received from people have just been lovely. I mean, the reviews from readers were quite nice, but I've received Facebook messages on Messenger, private messages that have just been heartwarming. And I had no idea that people would, some people have said it's helped them through their process because they laugh. The people have said they laugh out loud and they cry out loud with the book. And that's lovely. But if it inspires somebody to take this on or to know that you can make it a joyful experience if you approach it the right way. And
wow.
if you put the focus on your loved one, not on the burden that it may be placing on your shoulders, it makes it so much easier. And I hope that people get that from my story.
Wow, wow. And they are, there's an estimate of about 53 million family caregivers in the US alone. And most of them are drowning in the logistics, the grief, sometimes even the guilt of maybe not being able to serve their loved ones in a way that they wanted to. What is the single most important thing you would tell a caregiver this week? Not about the medication, the schedules, and all the things, or the insurance claims. All this is well structured and taken care of, but about how to show up in a way that they will not regret when it's all over.
I don't know if I've mentioned this earlier. So I have a motto. I've had again a pretty adventurous life, and I always go in with this motto, which is find the joy. And so I look for the positive in any circumstance, even some dire ones. You just say, okay, I'm going to benefit from this somehow, or I will make someone's life better. And so that would be the first thing. Go in with an open heart and open mind. But I would tell people if they're uncomfortable doing any part of this, don't do it. Find someone who is comfortable, because again, you don't want your loved one to feel guilty or feel like they're a burden. If you show up and let them know that you love them, but I'm not comfortable doing this, so you have a caregiver come in or a nurse or somebody come in to take care of that business, but you're still there, letting them know that you do care and you've hired the right people and stuff like that, that's enough. Out of the six of us, we had two siblings that were not comfortable doing any of the hands-on, and they were fine. They helped in other ways, and they were not comfortable doing it, and I was comfortable doing all of it. Or if I wasn't, I certainly kept my emotions out of the room. Again, because I didn't want my mom to feel bad. I wanted her to know that I'm doing this out of love, and we're gonna have as much fun as we can doing it. Showing up is a major factor. You don't have to get the hands on and do all that stuff, but showing up and letting them know that this is important is a big deal.
Wow, that's powerful. Showing up, and I like the recommendation that you gave that you can show up in other ways if you cannot handle the emotions, if you cannot handle the physically being there, you can still show up and make them know that you care, but then you are putting them in the hands of more qualified professionals to assist them on your
Yeah.
behalf, and that's quite powerful. So you went from carefree early life, bachelor life, to full-time caregiver, to award-winning author, to now resident of South France. That's a remarkable act. And what did the caregiving period clarify for you about what actually you wanted to do with the rest of your life? Things that maybe you could not have seen from the life you had in LA.
Wow. Well, it certainly makes me appreciate things for the time that we're on this earth. I have more patience, and that's another thing that I learned. I didn't have a good grasp of unconditional love. Again, not being married and having no children. So that was a gift to me to learn that, because there was going to be no commitment issues caring for my mom. But patience is a big deal, and especially someone growing up in New Jersey. Patience is not a virtue of New Jersey. And I think it's made me a better man. I do have a long term relationship I'm in now with Jacqueline, and she is, I think, maybe from what I learned, caring for my mom and stuff like that. I've been very patient, and relationships can be challenging. And you've got to look for the end of the road, or enjoy certainly the journey, and not worry about the short term conflicts that may come. And
Wow.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm enjoying
Wow.
life so much. I think I did before, but I think more so now. It's certainly a deeper, and I do gravitate towards older people more now.
Wow, that's powerful. Learning unconditional love, learning patience, learning how to even embrace people more, and that is helping you in your current relationship and also in the community where you are. That's powerful, Mark, and thank you for sharing that. Before we begin to close this episode, I want you to tell our listeners, what's up next for you? Are you writing again? Is there another story forming in the background? Or maybe some of our audience right now are thinking about writing or documenting. So if there is something you want to share with our audience about what's cooking in the background for Mac, it would be great.
Well, yes, I'm quite deep into my next book is about focusing more on my dad. And we have some of those stories are in A Cup of Tea in the Commode, and I expand on them. But before I turned in the final manuscript to the publisher, I cut out about 4,000 words because I thought, oh, these belong in another book. And so those were the beginning of my dad's book. But during those 8 days with my dad, I took very extensive notes. And now I'm going over those notes because this was almost 30 years ago. And so I have to, which is not easy. I have to relive those 8 days, and but again, I mean, it was a lovely way for my dad to go. It was a shame that he went when he did because he was still his mind was sharp, and he said, I have a lot to live for. So that was a shame, but his body was just suffering so much. And we have there's again some very fun stories like the one with my mom and the cheese labels. And I took my dad to the little village in Italy where his father came from 100 years earlier, and nobody had been there since. And while we were there, we found out a rumor about our family that was not true. And I don't want to ruin the ending, but we cleared the family name. And it wouldn't have happened if we didn't go there. And that was
Wow.
2 years before my dad passed.
Wow.
And it was beautiful because he said that was one of the highlights of his life. And and we spent 16 days together, just the two of us, traveling around Italy. And it was lovely. And it was a real good father son bonding moment. And so the book will be filled with those stories and certainly more about a snack food company and stuff like that. So that'll be fun. Hopefully, that'll come out in the next year or two.
Wow, thanks, Mark. And to our audience out there, you heard Mark, something it's coming and it's going to be a great book. And this time it's focused on his dad. And watch out for that book. We're going to be putting details about his current book, A Cup of Tea on the Commode. We'll put the details and everything in the show notes for anyone to reach out and grab a copy. What an amazing book. It is really an amazing, wonderful, wonderful love story. The name of this podcast is called The Clarity Mandate. And most of my guests find clarity in crises, in disruptions, in professional reinvention. You found yours probably in different places, maybe your childhood home in New Jersey, dealing with a cup of tea, maybe in the face of your 89-year-old mother who had decided she was gonna exit, but you showed up and things changed. The question is, what, in your view, has been one of your most, call it, clarity moments that has defined the trajectory of your life and the way you approach things, not just about caregiving, the writing, but about what living actually means for you right now?
Well, I'll go back to my motto, which is to find a joy. If you focus on looking for the joy and the positive in any situation, um, it just makes life so much easier. And I'll tell you a quick moment that might be related to that. I was visiting a friend's design firm in Los Angeles, and a very angry woman burst through the front door and said somebody parked in her driveway again. And the company was right around the corner from a residential zone, and they had 30 people working there. So they all sometimes parked and blocked this woman. And she was angry. And when she came in, this was not the first time because everybody scattered. And somebody just delivered a box of chocolates And so I'm standing there and I'm a visitor, but I see the chocolates and this woman, and I said, Madam, would you like a piece of chocolate? Just to change her mindset. And she looked at me and completely, the anger is gone. And she says, well, I would love one, but I need to watch my weight. And I said, Madam, I'm looking at you and you don't need to worry about anything. Please have a piece of chocolate. And that woman took a piece of chocolate and she floated out of that office. And everybody started coming back. And I said, that is how you treat that woman. Whoever parked and blocked her driveway is the one who's wrong. She maybe be angry, but she had a reason to be angry. You need to do something like that when you do something wrong. And I think it was a nice lesson. And it was like with a cup of tea. I kind of did it in jest, but it ended up being a learning moment.
That's so powerful. And I just want to thank you. This is Mark Steven Porro, an industrial designer, actor, filmmaker, um, accidental non-profit founder, deliberate caregiver, and now author of one of the most celebrated books that you might want to um, have a read, a cup of tea on the commode. This is not just a caregiver manual. You want to read this book. It is a clarity manual, in my view, and exactly the kind of story that our show, The Clarity Mandate, was built to carry stories like this. So, to everyone that is listening out there, and you are in the middle of the chapter of choosing the things that you want to do, I think Mark has done us justice today. He has brought us some clarity, raising the kind of transitions. He moved from LA back to New Jersey and now south of France and winning, dealing with all the issues. And he talked about finding the joy. And I would like this to stay with you in the middle of your own challenges as you listen to this episode. Where is your joy? He has given you that mandate to execute, and a cup of tea on the commode is available everywhere that you books are sold. We would also put details in the show notes for you to have. And thanks, Mark, for being on the Clarity Mandate podcast. And I am Dr. Vivian Atwood, and this has been the Clarity Mandate.